A party of adventurers battles the dungeon master and finally claims victory, thanks to the magic of a young mage. However, the scene soon reveals that the mage is actually a character being controlled by a gamer who has just unlocked a new achievement. As the difficulty of the game increases, the stages become far more challenging, yet the player still manages to clear them while playing as a mage. After completing the stage, he receives several new titles. Suddenly, a pop-up appears on his computer screen asking if he would like to challenge the final difficulty level, called Developer. Driven by his gamer's curiosity, he decides to give it a try. The game is called Abyssal Labyrinth, and after accepting the challenge, he unlocks a special ability known as Turn-Based Hourglass, which was awarded for clearing the turn-based master difficulty. Just like before, he creates his character as the mage Calum. He invests all 10 of his starting points into intelligence and clicks the Start Game button. The moment he does, a brilliant, shining light bursts out from the computer screen. Confused and disoriented, he suddenly finds himself being shoved by a man inside what appears to be the game world. The stranger angrily calls him a criminal. Thinking it must be a dream, the gamer is baffled. After all, he has been sitting at his computer playing games the entire time. His confusion only makes the man even angrier. The stranger throws him to the ground and storms away. Now in pain and completely bewildered, Calum stands up, still wondering whether this is truly a dream. Soon, they arrive at the entrance to the labyrinth. There, an old man explains that all of them have been turned into slaves as punishment for their crimes, and the labyrinth is their only chance to change their fate. If they manage to escape alive, they can use the money earned inside the maze to buy their freedom. They may even earn the opportunity to enroll in the Magic Academy. Hearing this, Calum is shocked. The old man standing before him is a character straight out of the game Abyssal Labyrinth, and at that moment, he realizes the truth. He is actually inside the game itself. Soon after, the slaves are divided into small groups and sent into the labyrinth. Calum is placed in a party with 3 other people. Although he still has no idea what exactly is happening, he realizes that he is now in the body of the character he just created. And if this labyrinth truly follows the same rules as the game, then every monster they encounter will be extremely dangerous. Deciding that strategy is the only way to survive, Calum first attempts to assess the abilities of his teammates. However, when he turns around, he finds one of the slaves acting like a complete lunatic, trying to frighten the others after seemingly losing his will to live. His behavior terrifies the group. Calum tries to calm everyone down and encourages them to stay focused, but the frightened man suddenly loses control and runs ahead in panic. Moments later, he is ambushed and killed by goblins. The elf girl begins crying out. Meanwhile, the lunatic man, who had already lost all hope, makes no attempt to defend himself and is also killed by a goblin spear. Now only 2 of them remain, Calum and the elf girl, facing 2 approaching goblins. The goblins charge straight toward Calum, but at that very moment, a notification appears before his eyes. Hourglass of Turn has been activated. This special ability freezes time for 60 seconds during a single turn. A countdown begins in front of Calum as the entire world around him stops moving. Now, with time temporarily on his side, Calum quickly begins planning how to survive. In a hurry, he raises his wand, only to realize that even a single movement consumes an action point. He checks his status and sees that he only has 3 points remaining. Thinking carefully, Calum takes a deep breath and suddenly realizes something important. Although he cannot freely move without spending points, he can still speak, and doing so does not consume any action points. In this strange world, speaking functions just like a chat command in the game. Using this discovery, Calum carefully points his wand at the goblin, spending the necessary action points. Then he prepares a fireball spell and releases it at the exact moment the hourglass ability ends. The fireball forms instantly and strikes the goblins, defeating them in a single attack and leaving the elf girl completely stunned. Since this new reality appears to follow the same rules as the game, especially when it comes to magic, Calum realizes that no one understands these mechanics better than he does. After the battle, Calum approaches the elf girl, hoping to find a reliable teammate. After all, even he does not know how long it will take to find the labyrinth's exit, and turns to the elf girl, asking what spell is embedded in her wand. Through tears, she replies that it contains the spell Lightning Shock, but admits that she has never actually used a wand before. Even so, Calum believes it is better than nothing. He advises her not to hesitate. If a monster charges at her, she must fire immediately. She nods, taking his advice seriously. With that, the two of them begin searching for the exit gate. Whoever forced Calum into this brutal world, whether it was a developer or something far beyond that, one thing is certain. Calum has already made up his mind. No matter what happens, he will survive. A few years earlier, the labyrinth suddenly erupted. Monsters poured out from its depths and spread across the surface, causing widespread destruction. Countless adventurers and mages lost their lives during that disaster. In response, the world's leaders created a harsh system to train future labyrinth explorers. Slaves are sent into the labyrinth, and only those who survive are allowed to grow stronger and earn a chance at freedom. That is the premise of the game's story. However, Calum knows that this world may not follow the game's rules perfectly, so he decides to remain extremely cautious. The elf girl thanks him for saving her and introduces herself as Yurnal. Calum also introduces himself, and the two continue walking deeper into the labyrinth. As they move forward, Yurnal remarks that Calum seems surprisingly calm. She remembers that he talked a lot with other people back on the slave ship, which makes him appear completely different now. Her comment immediately worries Calum. If there were people who knew the original Calum before he arrived in this world, he would need to be very careful about how he behaves. Trying to stay alert, he quietly tells her to focus and keep her voice down. But the moment after he says this, Yurnal accidentally steps on a trap tile, instantly activating Hourglass of Turn. Time freezes again as Calum immediately analyzes the situation. On the first floor of the labyrinth, traps often involve projectiles shooting from the walls. He quickly checks Yurnal's surroundings and notices there are no holes or openings in the walls that could launch anything toward her. Next, he examines his own side. Although it costs a few action points, he scans the area carefully. Fortunately, there are no hidden holes nearby, and the ceiling appears safe as well. That leaves one likely possibility, a floor trap. Calum recalls that there are 4 common types of floor traps on the first level of the labyrinth. The first is the rising spike trap, where spikes burst upward from the ground. The second is the exploding nail bomb trap, which releases a powerful blast with a wide radius that could seriously injure both of them. The third type is a gas trap, releasing poison or sleeping gas that would leave them helpless and easy prey for monsters. And the final possibility is a pit trap, where the floor collapses and drops victims directly to the second floor of the labyrinth, often with no chance of survival. Because the Hourglass ability activated, Calum knows the trap poses a threat to him as well. While he can rule out the spike trap, there is not enough time to safely prepare for the other possibilities. If Yurnal lifts her foot, the trap might trigger immediately and endanger them both. So Calum makes a quick decision. Before the Hourglass ability ends, he steps forward and places his own foot on the trap tile. The moment time resumes, Yurnal loses her balance and stumbles as Calum pushes her aside. Calmly, he explains that she had stepped on a trap that would activate the instant her foot left the tile, so he replaced her position to keep it from triggering. The situation frightens Yurnal badly, and she anxiously asks what they should do next. Thinking quickly, Calum tells her to retrieve the oak barrel they passed earlier in the corridor. She immediately runs off to get it while Calum remains standing on the trap tile. Traps like this can often be neutralized by placing a heavy object on the trigger plate, so once the barrel is placed there, it should keep the mechanism pressed down. Calum estimates that Yurnal should return within 10 minutes. However, more than 30 minutes pass with no sign of her return. Calum begins to worry that she might have fallen into another trap or encountered monsters somewhere in the labyrinth. He even starts questioning whether trusting her was the right decision. But just as those doubts grow stronger, Yurnal finally returns, rolling the oak barrel down the corridor. She apologizes for taking so long and explains that the barrel was extremely heavy, making it difficult for her to move by herself. Relieved, Calum praises her effort and instructs her to carefully place the barrel on the exact tile where he is standing. After stepping away to a safe distance, Calum switches to a telekinesis wand to make sure there are no hidden traps nearby. Once he confirms the area is safe, he uses the wand to move the barrel slightly, triggering the trap from a distance. The mechanism activates harmlessly, and the danger is cleared. With the traps safely handled, Calum and Yurnal continue their journey through the labyrinth. However, They both know that many more monsters and traps are waiting ahead, and surviving will require constant caution. Even in this dangerous situation, Calum knows there is still hope. Thanks to the Hourglass of Turn, he has the advantage of acting first. Since they are still on the first floor of the labyrinth, his 10 points in intelligence should be enough to handle most threats. However, Calum still has several questions. He needs to confirm whether he can activate the Hourglass ability whenever he wants, and he also wants to verify whether casting magic consumes action points. Just as he is thinking about this, a pair of goblins suddenly appear, giving Calum the perfect opportunity to test his theory. Without hesitation, he activates the Hourglass of Turn. Time freezes, and Calum quickly switches to his fire wand. He casts a fireball, and after the spell's 5-second cooldown ends, he casts another one, which consumes 1 action point. A moment later, the Hourglass effect ends. As time resumes, the 2 fireballs launch forward and strike the goblins, defeating them instantly. From this small experiment, Calum realizes something important. In theory, he could cast up to 4 fireballs within a single turn, giving him a powerful advantage in battle. Yurnal watches the scene in complete amazement. Calum's casting speed is incredibly fast, and he can even cast spells without chanting. Having just one of these talents would already be considered impressive, yet Calum possesses both. Meanwhile, Yurnal begins to feel discouraged. She believes she is too weak and cannot properly use magic, which makes her feel like she is only slowing Calum down. Calum also realizes that she is not suited for direct combat, as either a warrior or a mage. However, she is still an elf, which makes him curious. He asks how far she can jump. Yurnal explains that when she lived in the fairy forest, she could jump around 4 meters. Hearing this surprises Calum. That kind of ability means her agility must be at least 5 points or higher. Immediately thinking of a new strategy, Calum picks up the bow dropped by one of the defeated goblins and hands it to Yurnal, telling her to try using it. She quickly admits that she feels far more comfortable with a bow than with a wand. Seeing this, Calum tells her to provide support from the rear whenever monsters appear. At the same time, he collects her wand as well, meaning he now holds the wands of all their fallen teammates. Yurnal feels relieved and happy that she can finally contribute to their survival. But just as they begin moving again, Yurnal suddenly stops. She says she can hear someone following them. Calum quickly looks down the corridor they came from, but sees no one. He checks the other direction as well, yet all he finds is darkness. Still, Yurnal confidently points toward a specific direction, insisting that the sound came from there. Calum decides to test her senses. He asks her to close her eyes, then throws several small stones in a random direction. After they land, he asks her to tell him how many stones fell and where they landed. Without hesitation, Yurnal answers that 3 stones landed about 4 meters away. This confirms Calum's suspicion. Yurnal possesses an ability similar to a game skill known as sound mapping, allowing her to detect sounds and judge the position of nearby targets. When Calum asks her to focus again, Yurnal says that 4 people are approaching their location quickly. Calum does not know why they might be following them, but he prepares for the worst. Facing a full party that has survived the labyrinth so far will not be easy. To gain an advantage, Calum and Yurnal quietly hide near a corner and wait for the approaching group. Soon enough, the other party finally comes into view. Calum steps out first and calmly asks why they have been chasing them. A bald man holding a shield answers him. He says they have no business with Calum himself. However, they want him to hand over the elf girl, Yurnal. Their opponents are a group of 4 men who appear well organized and experienced in battle formation. They demand that Calum hand over Yurnal if he wants to stay alive. The bald man leading the group carries a sturdy shield that cannot be pierced by low-tier magic or simple arrows, making him confident that Calum and Yurnal's attacks will not work on him. The bald man then offers Calum a deal. He suggests that Calum join their group, forming a 5-man party. Yurnal gets terrified hearing this. Trembling and close to tears, she calls out Calum's name for help. Calum, however, remains silent for a moment while the bald man continues listing the supposed advantages of joining them instead of protecting Yurnal. But in reality, Calum has already made up his mind. He knows that if he travels with Yurnal, he can trust her enough to rest while she keeps watch. So Calum firmly warns them to leave if they value their lives. Hearing this makes Yurnal visibly relieved, but the bald man becomes furious. He immediately orders the group's archer to kill Calum. The moment the arrow is fired, Hourglass of Turn activates. Calum had already given them a chance to walk away. Perhaps they misunderstood his stance with the dual wands, thinking it was defensive. But if that was their assumption, they made a serious mistake. Calum quickly analyzes the battlefield. Beneath the enemy's feet lies a small puddle of water. In his hand, he holds a lightning-type wand capable of casting lightning shock. Normally, the spell can only affect a single target, but water can spread electricity. Using one action point, Calum casts lightning shock and directs it toward the puddle beneath the group. Next, Calum spends another action point to prepare Fireball. His plan is simple: strike them one by one before they can recover. The first attack hits the puddle area, while the next is aimed directly at the bald man. As the hourglass effect ends and time resumes, Calum's enemies suddenly find themselves in a desperate situation. Everything unfolds exactly as Calum predicted. The electric shock makes them lose their grip on their weapons, and a fireball strikes the puddle, creating thick steam that quickly clouds their vision. Before the bald man can shout orders for his team to scatter, another fireball hits him directly. At that moment, Calum tells Urinal to fire her arrows. She immediately takes aim and begins shooting. The steam is so dense that normal vision would be useless, but with Urinal's sound mapping ability, she can still track their positions. Calum instructs her to shoot all of them. His own spells are still on cooldown, so Urinal must take down at least one opponent. Calum assumes the bald man has already been badly injured by the fireball, meaning he only needs to deal with the others afterward. He tries to cast another spell, but the wand still has 2 seconds left before it can be used again. Frustrated by the slow passage of time, he tells Urinal to target the warrior first. However, Urinal suddenly interrupts him and calmly says that she has already killed them all. Calum is stunned. He only heard 2 arrows being fired. As the steam slowly fades, the truth becomes visible. Somehow, Urinal managed to eliminate them with just 2 arrows. Calum cannot hide his surprise. He jokingly remarks that Urinal might actually be scarier than he thought. Urinal apologizes to Calum. Calum reassures her that there is nothing to apologize for. In fact, thanks to her actions, they both survived. He then asks if that was truly her first real fight. Urinal confirms that it was. Calum admits that it was also his first time ever using magic against people. But in a place like the labyrinth, survival sometimes leaves no other choice. Once the situation settles, while searching the area, Urinal finds a backpack and brings it to Calum. Since it might belong to another adventurer, they carefully check its contents. Inside, they find a handkerchief, a frying pan, bread, a knife, a rope, and a wallet. Calum opens the wallet and discovers an identification card belonging to someone named Avison. Realizing the bag originally belonged to someone else, Calum concludes that the owner either died earlier and had his belongings taken, or was abandoned and later killed. Thinking about it reminds Calum that even in the game, there were countless ways to die inside the labyrinth. Without the Hourglass of Turn, Calum knows he would already be dead. Relying purely on luck and a single ability is not how Calum wants to survive. After making up his mind, he starts walking forward again. From now on, he will develop a thorough strategy, one with as few unpredictable variables as possible. It is finally time for Calum to accept the truth. This place may resemble the world of a game, but for him, it has become reality. And if he wants to live, he will have to clear it. Calum and Urinal continue exploring the labyrinth for quite some time. After nearly 12 hours of non-stop goblin hunting, Calum notices that Urinal is becoming completely exhausted. Seeing this, he decides it is time for them to rest, which makes Urinal visibly relieved. They soon find a safe spot and set up a small fire. Urinal prepares a few simple sandwiches and hands one to Calum. As they eat, she once again thanks him for saving her twice that day. Calum, however, gives credit to her as well. Thanks to her help, they were able to gather a large number of magic stones from the goblins they defeated. Urinal then brings up the bald man's earlier offer, but Calum immediately dismisses it. He tells her that he would never abandon a trustworthy comrade. Hearing this makes Urinal tear up with happiness. Grateful for his words, she offers to stand guard while Calum sleeps first. Calum accepts her offer and lies down to rest. The moment he falls asleep, his character enters sleep mode, and a notification appears informing him that he has leveled up to level 3. Calum quickly realizes that leveling up is triggered when entering sleep mode. Before coming to this world, Calum had already invested 10 points in wisdom, and with the bonuses from dual-wielding wands, his total has now reached 12. From his knowledge of the game, he knows that a total of 13 stat points is required to break goblin shields with magic. Since he had also maxed out wisdom in the original game, he decides to add 2 more points to wisdom. While reviewing the status menu, Calum notices that he can also view Urinal's stats, likely because she is part of his party. Her level is also level 3. After reviewing her stats, Calum adds 1 more point to her agility before ending sleep mode. When he wakes up, Calum finds himself still inside the game world rather than back in reality. Urinal is barely managing to stay awake while standing guard, clearly exhausted. The moment she sees Calum awake, she happily lies down to rest. However, she notices him picking up a shield nearby. Yawning, she asks what he plans to do with it. Calum explains that he wants to test his new power. He places the shield on the ground and casts Fireball. The spell strikes the shield and completely shatters it into pieces. Seeing this confirms Calum's suspicion. This world is not just a dream. Urinal's eyes widen in shock after watching Calum destroy the shield so easily. But exhaustion quickly takes over, and she soon falls into a deep sleep. After she wakes up later, the two decide to continue searching for the exit gate. Even Calum does not know where it might appear because the exit locations in the labyrinth are randomized, relying purely on luck. Unfortunately, Calum believes his luck as a transmigrator is probably terrible. However, after walking for a while, they unexpectedly discover the exit room. Standing near the gate are 3 experienced adventurers guarding the area. Calum carefully observes their equipment and quickly concludes that they are likely a veteran party, so he remains cautious. One of them, a dwarf, asks if Calum and Urinal are part of the university's slave teams. Calum confirms this and senses no immediate hostility from them. The dwarf then turns to his healer, Emma, and asks when the university last sent slaves into the labyrinth. Emma replies that it has been over a day and a half. Hearing this, the dwarf expresses genuine surprise that Calum and his teammate not only survived but even managed to reach the exit. He also notes that the elf, Urinal, made a smart decision by switching from magic to using a bow instead. His sharp observation makes Urinal nervous, and she instinctively hides behind Calum. The dwarf then asks Calum if he is truly confident in using dual wands. Calum calmly answers yes. Still doubtful, the dwarf asks if Calum has a fire wand, which Calum confirms. The dwarf then consults his other teammate, Zykel, about what they should do. Both Zykel and Emma agree that recruiting Calum would be beneficial, especially since he seems confident in his abilities. The dwarf even compares Calum to their former mage, Avison, though he admits they currently have no better option. Hearing the name Avison, Calum immediately realizes they are referring to the original owner of the backpack he found earlier. He asks if they recently lost a mage companion. The dwarf explains that they encountered a black hornet on the first floor, and during the battle, they lost their teammate. Emma quickly interrupts and insists that Avison is not truly dead. She had cast soul preservation, meaning he could still be revived with a revival scroll. However, they would need to leave the labyrinth to obtain one, which makes reviving him impossible for now. From this conversation, Calum quickly pieces together the situation. Although they have discovered the exit gate, a gate boss is blocking the way. The party needs a mage to defeat it. Calum considers the possibilities. Monsters like trolls, salamanders, or brass goats would not trouble such an experienced team. If the boss were a flying-type creature, they would have focused on recruiting Urinal, the archer. But instead, they specifically need a fire mage. Putting the clues together, Calum calmly asks if the gate boss is a venomous spider. His sudden guess shocks all 3 adventurers. The venomous spider is a terrifying creature that constantly launches lethal venom and sticky webs. The entire exit room is usually covered in webs, and the monster moves rapidly along the ceiling while attacking to inflict slow and bind effects. A single mistake while caught in its webs could easily lead to death. There is only one effective counter-strategy: a fire mage who can burn the webs, force the spider down from the ceiling, and then help defeat it. This is a standard method used by experienced adventurers. Realizing Calum understands the situation perfectly, the 3 adventurers immediately agree to temporarily allow Calum and Urinal to join their team. However, Calum instantly refuses. Urinal is shocked by his decision and asks why he would reject such a good opportunity. But Calum calmly explains the real reason. The opportunity they are offering only guarantees the chance to defeat the boss and reveal the exit gate. What they deliberately failed to mention is something far more important. Only 4 people can pass through the exit gate. Calum explains that each time someone passes through the gate, its stability rapidly decreases. The gate's color shifts from green to yellow and then red, collapsing completely within about 5 minutes. In the end, no more than 4 people can escape before it disappears. Since that party already has 3 members, there is only 1 remaining spot available, and they want Calum to fill it, which means that Yurnal would be left behind. Realizing this horrifying truth, Yurnal is completely stunned. The dwarf praises Calum for his sharp knowledge and insight, confirming that he never intended to hide the truth about the exit gate. However, he explains that their party cannot take both Calum and Yurnal with them. Right now, they only need 1 mage. With that in mind, the dwarf offers Calum a deal: abandon the elf and join their team. Hearing this shocks Yurnal. She nervously looks at Calum, waiting for his answer. Calum remains silent for a moment. From his perspective, the offer is very tempting. However, he quickly thinks about the bigger picture. Even if he escapes the labyrinth, he would still remain a slave unless he can buy his freedom. If that happens, he would simply be thrown back into the labyrinth again. There is also another important concern. Even if he joins this group temporarily, there is no guarantee they would continue traveling with him afterward. After thinking everything through, Calum finally makes his decision. He refuses to abandon Yurnal. His answer surprises everyone, including Yurnal herself. Calum then presents a new proposal. Instead of abandoning Yurnal, the dwarf's party can hire both of them. The dwarf finds the proposal interesting and asks Calum how much payment he wants. Without hesitation, Calum demands 10,000 gold coins. This outrageous amount immediately angers the dwarf and worries Yurnal. She asks Calum if he truly understands how valuable 10,000 gold coins are. Of course, Calum understands perfectly. The magic stones and supplies they collected on the first floor could sell for around 2,000 gold coins. Meanwhile, the ransom price for both Calum and Yurnal is 3,000 gold each. With 10,000 gold coins, Calum could free both of them from slavery and still have enough money left for emergencies. While the dwarf hesitates, his teammates, Emma and the other man, quietly encourage him to accept the deal. Calum had already predicted this reaction. From their equipment and the fact that they hired a priest known for expensive services, it is clear they have plenty of money. Calum also notices how exhausted they look. They clearly want to escape the labyrinth as quickly as possible. Most importantly, they still hope to save their fallen teammate Avison. Time is running out for them. In their current situation, they have little choice but to accept Calum's conditions. To ensure trust between both sides, Calum asks the priest to swear the agreement under the name of the goddess Nathaniel. Emma confirms that sacred oaths made in the goddess's name cannot be broken. Realizing he has no better option, the dwarf attempts to negotiate the price down to 9,000 gold coins. Calum refuses and sets his final price at 9,500. With no other choice, the dwarf reluctantly agrees. Emma laughs lightly and calls Calum and Yurnal forward to formalize the oath. She sets the contract conditions. The agreement will remain valid until the dwarf Vertanen's party successfully exits through the gate. If either party is wiped out before then, the contract becomes void. Both representatives, Calum and Vertanen, swear the sacred oath. With the deal complete, the group immediately heads deeper into the exit room. As they advance, the number of spider webs covering the walls and ceiling increases. The deeper they go, the more obvious it becomes that the venomous spider boss is lurking somewhere above them. Calum also notices several neutral objects placed in a corner, explosive items that adventurers sometimes use in emergencies. Soon, webs begin appearing across the floor as well. Calum warns everyone to avoid stepping on them, because once caught, escaping the sticky threads becomes extremely difficult. The dwarf tries to maintain control as the leader, but suddenly a loud screech echoes through the room. The venomous spider launches an attack from the ceiling. Its strike nearly hits the dwarf, but he manages to dodge at the last second. Immediately, he orders Calum to fire a fireball at the floor to force the spider down. The spider moves extremely quickly across the ceiling, but each attack briefly exposes its position. Calum realizes this might be their only chance to deal massive damage. Without hesitation, he activates Hourglass of Turn. Within the frozen moment, Calum rapidly casts 4 fireballs, consuming all of his remaining action points. The hourglass ability then deactivates, and time resumes. All 4 fireballs hit the venomous spider almost instantly. The dwarf and his teammates are stunned. Not only did Calum cast 4 fireballs in rapid succession, but he did it without chanting. Seeing their shock, Calum quickly snaps them back to reality and tells them to move. Calum calls out to Yurnal, and she reacts immediately, firing arrows toward the spider as it crashes down to the ground. However, her arrows fail to damage the monster's tough body. Calum quickly tells her to stop, as continuing would be pointless. Once the spider lands, Calum begins issuing rapid instructions. He tells Emma to cast a magic barrier and orders Zykel to charge the moment the barrier is ready. The warrior becomes irritated at being commanded by someone he considers a rookie. Nevertheless, he charges forward and injures one of the spider's legs and quickly retreats. At that moment, the venomous spider prepares to release its poisonous attack. The dwarf orders Emma to cast Constellation Shield to block the explosion. But Calum suddenly proposes a different strategy: freeze the poison before it detonates. Calum casts Ice Spike. Then he quickly tells Emma to retreat and orders the dwarf to attack immediately. Emma hesitates, which irritates Calum. He urgently tells the dwarf to finish the monster while the opportunity still exists. The dwarf still insists on waiting for the shield, which only makes Calum more frustrated. In the game, he would simply click a command and everything would happen instantly. Finally, the dwarf gives in, muttering about Calum's short temper as he charges forward. With a powerful strike, he delivers the finishing blow and kills the venomous spider. Everyone feels relieved that the battle is finally over. However, Calum remains cautious. In the game, when the venomous spider appears as the boss, there is a very small chance that a second phase could occur. And now he cannot help but wonder, did the others forget about that possibility? The dwarf and his teammates begin discussing how difficult the fight against the venomous spider had been. However, Yurnal suddenly notices that Calum is still holding his wand pointed upward. Curious, she asks him why he is staring at the ceiling. Calum calmly tells her to look up. The moment she does, Yurnal freezes in fear and shouts in alarm. Hearing her reaction, the dwarf and the others also look up, and they are immediately shocked. The entire ceiling is covered with venomous spider eggs. It becomes clear that neither the dwarf nor Emma knew about the second phase of the venomous spider boss. Acting quickly, Calum immediately gives orders. He tells Yurnal to roll the oak barrel they brought earlier straight into the center of the room with all her strength. Yurnal reacts instantly and rolls the barrel toward the dwarf's position. Calum then instructs the priest, Emma, to cast weapon light on one of Yurnal's arrows so she can illuminate the ceiling. Once the glowing arrow reveals the location of the largest egg cluster, the dwarf grabs the barrel and hurls it toward the eggs with all his strength. At that exact moment, Calum activates Hourglass of Turn and rapidly casts 4 fireballs, aiming directly at the barrel. The barrel explodes, and the massive blast destroys the entire egg cluster. Once again, Calum performs silent casting at incredible speed, leaving the dwarf and his teammates stunned as they watch the attack unfold. The dwarf cannot help but acknowledge Calum's incredible talent. With the eggs destroyed, the exit gate finally appears. At last, the danger seems to be over. Fighting alongside an experienced party certainly made things easier, but at the same time, Calum finds it frustrating that he cannot control the team the way he could in the game. Zykel now seems quite impressed with Calum, and the dwarf openly praises his abilities. Curious, the dwarf asks what Calum's profession was before becoming a slave. Of course, Calum cannot exactly say that he was a devoted gamer who spent most of his time playing games. The dwarf admits that he had not expected much from Calum and Yurnal when they first met. In fact, he assumed they would probably die quickly. Hearing this makes Yurnal visibly angry, but Calum had already taken such attitudes into account when he demanded 9,500 gold coins earlier. The dwarf confirms that he will pay the agreed amount. However, he adds that the matter is not completely finished yet. Calum calmly agrees with him, which confuses the others. Calum explains the reason. The payment must be settled in the village. According to their contract, the agreement is only fulfilled once the dwarf's party successfully crosses the exit gate. Until then, the deal is not complete. Yurnal, clearly worried, urges them to simply leave through the gate since it is right in front of them. But Emma gently explains that the sacred contract must be followed. Caleb must also cross the gate with them in order to receive the 9,500 gold coins. This realization shocks Yurnal. If Caleb cannot leave with them, the contract will become void. After all, no one would carry such a huge amount of gold into the labyrinth in the first place. This rule often works against those who cannot safely return to the village. Caleb already knew about this system. In the labyrinth, high-value contracts are always settled outside, not inside the dungeon. Zykel finally understands why the dwarf negotiated the payment down earlier. He jokingly tells Caleb that once they reach the village, he should make sure to empty the dwarf's wallet, which essentially means the entire party's funds. Just as they are preparing to leave, Caleb suddenly mentions that the backpack he has been carrying actually belonged to Avison. The party is immediately surprised. The dwarf quickly checks the bag and confirms that it truly belongs to their missing teammate. The dwarf then asks Caleb what he wants in return for returning the bag. Surprisingly, Caleb does not ask for money. Instead, he simply asks to keep the backpack itself. The dwarf gladly agrees. Since the extra supplies are a burden to carry, he even allows Caleb to keep the remaining food inside. For now, the dwarf's party does not plan to leave immediately. They must prepare a resurrection scroll for Avison, and their previous scroll had already been used during an earlier attempt to save him. Jokingly, the dwarf remarks that maybe Avison should consider quitting labyrinth exploration altogether. Laughing, the dwarf even says that Caleb seems 100 times more capable than Avison and jokingly talks about recruiting him in the future. However, hearing such comments only makes Yurnal feel more uneasy. Suddenly, she suggests that the party should take Caleb with them. Her unexpected proposal surprises everyone. Nervously, Yurnal begins listing the advantages of bringing Caleb along. She explains that once Caleb receives the 9,500 gold coins, he could start a new life, buy proper equipment, and join their party as a full member. Emma then gently asks Yurnal what she plans to do herself. Surviving alone in the labyrinth is extremely dangerous. Even someone as capable as Caleb would struggle. Yurnal tightly grips her bow as she answers. She admits that she doubts she will ever find the exit room again. At this rate, she will likely die somewhere in the labyrinth anyway. That is why she wants Caleb to leave with them. If Caleb had not been there earlier, she believes she would have died long ago. Thanks to him, she managed to survive this far. With tears in her eyes, Yurnal thanks Caleb for everything he has done. The dwarf explains that recruiting members from another party inside the labyrinth is usually considered poor etiquette. Hearing this makes Yurnal even more anxious. The dwarf then admits that, at first, he simply saw Caleb and Yurnal as criminal slaves who could help defeat the boss. He had not really thought about what would happen to them afterward. However, after fighting together, his view has changed. Now he wants to treat them with proper respect. Because of that, the dwarf presents a proposal for both of them. First, he invites Caleb to officially join their party. If Caleb accepts, the dwarf promises him 25% profit sharing, along with the previously agreed 9,500 gold coins. Caleb recognizes that it is an extremely generous offer. Even Yurnal believes it is a great opportunity, so she tearfully encourages Caleb to accept it and leave with them. But the moment she says that, a strange notification window suddenly appears in Caleb's vision, something only he can see. The message explains that if Caleb chooses to stay by Yurnal's side at this moment, her trust level will reach 100%. In addition, Caleb will unlock a new feature of the Hourglass of Turn, allowing him to give commands to Yurnal while the ability is active. Caleb quickly realizes he has discovered a hidden mechanic of the Hourglass ability. In the original game, certain skills could evolve through special routes as players leveled up. It seems the same system exists here as well. The new skill expansion allows Caleb to issue commands during the Hourglass of Turn. When the ability ends, Yurnal can immediately carry out those commands. Of course, the commands must remain within realistic limits. The dwarf then asks Caleb to make his decision. Instead of answering immediately, Caleb secretly activates Hourglass of Turn so he can calmly analyze the situation. On one side is the enhanced Hourglass ability and a talented archer like Yurnal. On the other side is immediate escape from the labyrinth and membership in a powerful, experienced party. After thinking it through, Caleb makes his choice. He decides to stay with Yurnal and escape the labyrinth together with her. Hearing this makes Yurnal cry even harder, overwhelmed with emotion. The dwarf's party also realizes how serious Calum is about his decision. In truth, Calum admits to himself that he might have made the same choice even if this were just a game. Investing in Urinal's potential could be far more beneficial in the long run. Besides, he simply is not cold-hearted enough to abandon someone who trusted him. Seeing Calum's resolve, even the usually expressionless warrior begins tearing up slightly. The dwarf and Emma also show their respect for Calum's determination. Emma then breaks the emotional silence and asks Calum a practical question. How does he plan to defeat the next exit boss with only the two of them? Calum calmly answers that he plans to purchase the spider's remains for 1,500 gold coins, which can be deducted from his payment. Before leaving, the dwarf smiles and tells Urinal that the moment she showed earlier, when Calum chose to stay, was even more impressive than the 4 ultra-fast fireball attack. As a token of appreciation, he even gives them a small share of additional supplies for their support. Emma also tells them that once they reach the surface, they should visit her at the Temple of Nathaniel. She promises that she will personally pay them their reward there. Before departing, Emma performs a goddess's blessing on Calum and Urinal. The blessing temporarily increases all their stats by 1 point for 12 hours, while also granting immunity to curses. After that, the group gathers near the exit gate. Before leaving, everyone introduces themselves properly to Calum and Urinal. Then, one by one, they step through the gate and disappear. Once they are alone again, Urinal asks Calum why he stayed behind even though he had the perfect chance to escape. Calum knows she is worried that the two of them cannot defeat the next boss alone. But what she does not realize is that Calum has spent countless hours playing this game. In his mind, he has already calculated the strategy. He gently tells her to stop crying and begins extracting the venomous spider's poison fangs. Because Urinal's trust level has reached 100%, Calum now has the ability to give her commands during the hourglass of turn. Urinal continues extracting the spider's fangs for a while before suggesting that they should work together to finish faster. However, Calum asks her to trust him, assuring her that there is a reason he wants her to do it alone. Although Calum would like to help, he knows that the success rate of extracting items depends on dexterity. Calum currently has 0 points in dexterity, while Urinal has 2, making her far better suited for the task. While she continues the extraction, Calum quietly reviews the new details of the Hourglass skill expansion. He wants to understand exactly how far these commands can go. After some time, Urinal finally finishes extracting all the poison fangs. Calum packs them into the backpack and prepares to move forward. As they walk, he begins crafting poison arrows using the fangs they collected. Urinal smiles brightly after completing her task. Seeing her cheerful expression makes Calum feel satisfied, and that alone makes his decision feel worthwhile. Calum tells Urinal to combine the goblin arrows with the spider's poison fangs to create poison arrows. She agrees, but she's doubtful. Even if she manages to craft one, she believes it won't make much difference in battle. Calum explains that earlier they failed to deal real damage because their equipment was poor. Archers rely heavily on their gear. Bows are difficult to craft, but arrows are a different story. If they create special arrows, even a weak bow can unleash tremendous power. Calum then asks her to start crafting. Item combination success rates depend on dexterity, and since Urinal's dexterity isn't very high, he doesn't expect much. However, he's shocked when she successfully creates poison arrows with surprising ease. What shocks him even more is the risk involved. If she misjudges the force while combining the materials, the poison gland could burst and seriously harm her. Calum reads the poison arrow's description and tells her to store them carefully and only use them when he gives the order. With that settled, the two continue moving forward. While walking, Calum decides it's time to test the newly unlocked Hourglass of Turn expansion feature. He activates the hourglass and quietly commands Urinal to take a water bottle out of her bag and hand it to him. Interestingly, no action points are consumed since Calum himself isn't performing the action directly. When the hourglass ends, Urinal naturally pulls a water bottle from her bag and hands it to him. Curious, Calum asks why she did that. Urinal casually replies that she thought he might be thirsty. This makes Calum even more interested in how the ability will work during combat. After walking for a while, they encounter a group of goblins. Calum sees the perfect opportunity to test the system in battle. He activates the hourglass again, fires a fireball at one goblin, and commands Urinal to shoot the leg of another. The moment the hourglass ends, Yurnal immediately fires an arrow at the goblin's leg, exactly as instructed. Calum quickly finishes off the other goblin. Afterwards, he asks Yurnal why she aimed for the leg. She simply replies that it's the easiest target to hit. From this, Calum reaches an important conclusion. When he issues commands during the hourglass of turn, Yurnal carries them out through her own judgment and will. This makes the ability extremely useful, especially in situations where Calum might be busy handling something else. He also remembers the system's warning. Commands that go against Yurnal's nature or are too difficult might be harder for her to follow. Wanting to test the limits, Calum gives her a harmless command: do a simple dance. To his surprise, Yurnal actually starts dancing awkwardly. The moment becomes incredibly embarrassing for Calum. He quickly pretends nothing happened and starts walking again, while Yurnal's face turns bright red from embarrassment. As they continue through the labyrinth, the mood becomes tense again. To lighten the atmosphere and gather information, Calum activates the hourglass once more and commands Yurnal to tell him everything she knows about him before they entered the labyrinth. When the hourglass ends, Yurnal begins explaining. She recalls the time she first heard him speaking on the slave ship when they were transported together. According to what she heard, Calum became a slave because he attempted to kill someone from the Yoho tribe, who was also his teammate. Hearing that name triggers Calum's memory. The Yoho tribe is known for their intelligence, magical talent, beauty, and their ability to charm others. Trying to defend him, Yurnal quickly adds that the woman must have deserved it. The Calum she knows wouldn't do something like that without a reason. Calum doesn't comment on it and simply keeps walking. Yurnal continues explaining that Calum used to be an adventurer in a distant eastern labyrinth city. The Magic Academy usually places one experienced person in every group of 4 slave adventurers. Now she finally understands why those teams are structured that way. Eventually, while exploring deeper, the two finally discover the exit room. Calum expected the exit room to appear eventually, but finding it this quickly makes him uneasy. Yurnal suddenly notices someone lying near the exit gate. It's Avison. His body is brightly illuminated by soul preservation magic, keeping it perfectly intact. His appearance is pale but elegant, like a noble young master. Calum carefully examines the surroundings while explaining how expensive soul preservation magic is. There's no way a slave could ever afford something like that. He suggests that if they recover the body and return it to Avison's family, they might receive a reward. At that moment, Yurnal hears a disturbing sound nearby. However, Calum immediately notices something strange. The sound isn't the buzzing of wings. If the dwarf's information was correct and the enemy was a black hornet, they follow the sound and soon discover the source, a black hornet larva. Calum finds the situation extremely unsettling. The only reason the black hornet would leave its nest is if something unexpected forced it to. Trying to understand what's happening, Calum asks Yurnal if any adventurers recently went missing on the first floor of the labyrinth. She isn't sure about the details, but she remembers hearing about a rogue called Black Attack who disappeared. According to rumors, he defeated the Black Hornet alone after his entire party was wiped out. The moment Calum hears that, his expression changes. A rogue. That's the worst possible opponent for a mage. Seeing Calum's reaction, Yurnal nervously asks what's wrong. Instead of answering directly, Calum asks if she has ever heard of possessed adventurers. She shakes her head. Calum explains that it's an extremely rare phenomenon. Even after clearing countless floors in the game, there was only one recorded case where a possessed adventurer appeared as the exit boss on the first floor. In those cases, the labyrinth master captures the adventurer's soul and turns them into a thrall. They gain a permanent madness effect that cannot be removed. They retain all their skills and abilities, but become far stronger and far more dangerous. That would also explain why the exit room appeared so quickly. Yurnal's face turns pale after hearing this. Terrified, she asks if this means they're finished. Calum realizes that his reaction has frightened her. He quickly regains his composure and reassures her. Even though the situation is extremely difficult, it's not impossible. They can still win. Bertanen is relaxing at an inn, then the door suddenly bursts open. 2 people rush inside after hearing the news about Avison's death. The elderly woman is Avison's mother, and the man beside her is Avison's older brother. Bertanen explains that while searching for the exit room, Avison went ahead alone and was taken by a black hornet. Hearing this, Avison's mother breaks down in tears and nearly collapses. Her son quickly supports her and reassures her that the soul preservation spell on Avison's body is still active. Then he turns toward Vertanen with a sharp glare and asks whether Avison's death truly wasn't their fault. The man clearly carries an air of authority. He asks Vertanen about their plan to retrieve Avison's body. Vertanen calmly explains that the soul preservation magic will last for an entire week, so resurrecting Avison shouldn't be a problem. A resurrection scroll should be ready in 2 or 3 days, and as soon as it's prepared, they will depart to retrieve the body. Since time is limited, Avison's brother asks whether they will be able to locate the body quickly in the labyrinth. In response, Vertanen shows Avison's identity card and explains that they can cast a lost item tracking spell using it to locate the body. He also mentions that a certain genius mage was the one who managed to recover the identity card for them. This catches the attention of Avison's brother. But before Vertanen can say more, the innkeeper jumps in and says that the mage Vertanen is talking about is someone capable of both silent casting and ultra-high-speed spell casting. Avison's brother immediately assumes it's a joke. Someone with that level of magical talent could never possibly be a slave. The man introduces himself as Clarence. His mother, however, wonders if that very mage might be capable of rescuing Avison. Vertanen then reveals that the party currently exploring the labyrinth consists of only 2 people. Hearing that makes Clarence trust them even less. Still, Clarence's mother insists that they must recover Avison's body, even if they have to offer a large reward. At that moment, Adventurer stands up and asks how much they're willing to pay. He offers to bring his own party to retrieve the body, claiming that they are active on the 3rd floor. But Clarence simply glares at him and tells him to sit down and stay quiet. The intense pressure in Clarence's voice sends chills down the lizardman's spine, and he quickly backs away. After that, Clarence makes a decision. He will personally accompany Vertanen to rescue his brother. Clarence himself is a talented mage who has already reached the 5th floor. He is also very interested in meeting this mysterious mage named Calum. Meanwhile, the story shifts back to Calum and Urnal. The two consider waiting for the dwarf party to arrive, but Calum quickly realizes that they don't have the luxury of waiting. The black hornet larva they discovered will starve to death in about 2 days. This larva belongs to a monster that normally acts as the leader of the 1st floor. Its scent keeps other monsters away from the area. However, once that scent disappears, monsters will notice, and they will swarm the area. In other words, they can't stay here for long. Urnal suggests waiting for the next exit room to appear, but Calum immediately rejects the idea. If Back Attack truly has become the exit boss, then a normal 1st floor party would never be able to defeat him. Waiting for another exit room would only delay the inevitable. The only realistic plan is for Calum and Urnal to defeat Back Attack themselves and escape. However, the difficulty of that plan is extremely high. Urnal honestly admits that she isn't confident they can defeat Back Attack alone. But Calum says he has a method, though it will be very difficult. Still, it's their only option. Urnal agrees to follow whatever plan he proposes. Calum warns her to prepare herself, because what comes next will be a very rough strategy. Calum then begins what can only be described as hellish training. His goal is simple: defeat 100 goblins and reach level 5, which is nearly the maximum level achievable on the 1st floor of the labyrinth. They already reached level 4 after defeating the venomous spiders. If they grind relentlessly for 2 days, they should be able to reach level 5. At level 5, they will gain a growth branch point that allows them to unlock another special ability. As they hunt goblins, Calum carefully strategizes. They only collect the most valuable magic stones and discard the rest to save time. Their next goal is to hunt goblin shamans and gather as many useful scrolls as possible. After hours of relentless fighting, they finally stop to rest. Calum praises Urnal for her hard work, but she looks completely exhausted after the long grind. The black hornet larva is still alive, though it will likely die the next day since it hasn't eaten for several days. Calum begins preparing something else. He fills a large oak barrel with water and magic stones as part of his strategy. Once he finishes, he tells Urnal that it's finally time to rest. Urnal looks at him and suggests that they should take turns keeping watch. However, Calum insists that he should sleep first. That suggestion instantly annoys her, and the cold look she gives him sends chills down Calum's spine. But he can't help it. He absolutely needs to sleep first so he can level up and properly plan their strategy. Calum quickly explains his reasoning and promises that when they switch shifts, he'll extend her rest time by 30 minutes. Hearing that, Urinal's mood immediately improves, and she agrees to let him sleep first. Once Calum enters sleep mode, both of them finally reach level 5. Now, Calum has the chance to choose a brand new ability. After finalizing their preparations, Calum and Urinal step into the exit room. Urinal hesitates and asks if Calum really plans to face the boss while carrying the Black Hornet's egg. Calum calmly replies that he won't leave it behind. It's difficult to carry, but it will give them a strategic advantage during the fight. Inside, they find the legendary rogue, Back Attack, sitting on a throne made of stone. The moment he stands, he vanishes and reappears behind Calum, charging at him with lethal speed. Calum had already anticipated this and activated the Hourglass of Turns in advance, aiming strategically behind him. Calum starts with a 4 lightning strike, while simultaneously instructing Urinal to douse him with water. The hourglass ends, and Back Attack is struck by Calum's strike, falling to the ground. Urinal immediately hurls a water barrel onto him, drenching him completely. Calum then uses Ice Spike to freeze Back Attack's movements, but the rogue evades with a Shadow Leap. Thinking quickly, Calum lifts an oak barrel and orders Urinal to shoot it with an arrow. She follows his command, wetting the floor around Back Attack, and Calum freezes the surrounding area with another Ice Spike. He anticipates that Back Attack will try to step carefully or use a walking skill, but the rogue surprises him by throwing a dagger. Thanks to the Black Hornet's eggshell, Calum remains uninjured. Though his strategy is momentarily disrupted, the dagger's power is weakened due to the distance. Back Attack calls back the dagger and activates his invisibility. Calum immediately instructs Urinal to locate him. She notices subtle changes around her and shoots an arrow at his position. Back Attack dodges, revealing himself. The Hourglass of Turns is not yet ready. 15 seconds remain, but Calum anticipated this. He quickly targets the larva and kills it with an Ice Spike. This moment was precisely what Calum had trained for. Having leveled up, he activates the Hourglass of Turns and uses his special ability, Killing Momentum, which recovers 2 action points upon killing an enemy. Using both action points, Calum's strike lands. In the real world, he had been an expert marksman in the military, and his precision shows. Calum asks Urinal for Back Attack's location. Once identified, he freezes the rogue with an Ice Spike, immobilizing him. Calum then orders Urinal to fire a poison arrow. She does so, hitting Back Attack squarely, and now even breathing will gradually kill him. Calum's plan anticipates 2 damage per second until Back Attack succumbs. For a moment, it seems perfect, and Calum allows himself a brief relief. But suddenly, Back Attack begins glowing with a sinister red light. Alarmed, Calum immediately redirects his wand and informs Urinal that they must switch to Plan B. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but it has. The greatest danger of possessed adventurers in the labyrinth is that they can still wield the extraordinary abilities they had in life, and Back Attack is about to prove just how deadly that can be. Even though a possessed adventurer is one of the most dangerous threats in the labyrinth, Calum had already anticipated this possibility. That's why he prepared a backup strategy, Plan B, to cover every outcome. Before entering the boss room, Calum instructs Urinal to fire only 1 poison arrow first to test the enemy. While using both arrows would normally be the best strategy, he wants to confirm whether the possessed adventurer has a way to remove poison. Even for a skilled and agile thief, avoiding a Black Hornet's poison stinger completely is nearly impossible. Since Back Attack is a thief and unlikely to use magic, Calum deduces that any countermeasure would come from special abilities rather than potions or scrolls. Confirming whether Back Attack has detoxification abilities becomes his top priority. If he does, Plan B will begin. During the fight, Calum and Urinal manage to push Back Attack back and successfully strike him. However, Back Attack reveals his special ability, Adrenaline Rush, which removes all negative effects, restores 50 health points, and resets the cooldown of a first-tier skill. He immediately uses cautious steps and charges toward them. Calum cannot use the Hourglass of Turns yet, as it still has 3 seconds of cooldown remaining. When Urinal asks for permission to shoot, Calum refuses, knowing Back Attack can easily dodge. Instead, He focuses on creating distance from Urinal to set up Plan B. Calum sprints away and casts Ice Spike, but Back Attack dodges it and quickly grabs him, pinning him in a corner. Just as Back Attack is about to land a fatal blow, Calum calls out to Urinal, who is already aiming at the enemy. Back Attack reacts instantly, using Shadow Step to evade. Now that the distance between Calum and Urinal is ideal, and with both of them positioned near a cliff, Calum initiates Plan B. Back Attack attacks again, forcing Calum to use a potion he obtained from the dwarf party. However, as Calum pulls out one potion, Back Attack steals another and drinks it. This enrages Calum, but the plan is already in motion. At that moment, Calum activates the Hourglass of Turns, revealing that everything so far has been part of his strategy. To execute Plan B, Calum grips a potion bottle in his mouth and pulls out a scroll they had looted from a shaman goblin. He then signals Urinal that it's finally time to attack. As the Hourglass effect ends and all action points are consumed, Back Attack's seemingly fatal strike fails. The scroll turns out to be a magic armor that can nullify up to 5 attacks, as long as each deals less than 100 damage. Seizing the moment, Calum grabs Back Attack with all his strength and orders Urinal to fire. Despite struggling to break free, Back Attack is hit by the poison arrow. Now, the real battle begins, a test of endurance. Both Calum and Back Attack are exposed to the same poison, and the pain is overwhelming. He tries to drink a potion, but Back Attack continues to resist. Eventually, the poison takes effect, and Back Attack collapses. The moment he falls, Calum drinks another potion but also collapses from the effects. He tells Urinal to give him more potions as she struggles to hold back tears while helping him. Even with multiple potions, survival is uncertain. However, Calum has no choice but to endure. After some time, the exit gate finally appears, and Calum regains enough strength to stand. He praises Urinal's aim, but she admits she was worried the arrow might hit him due to the terrain blocking her view. Ranged attacks are less effective from lower ground, and Back Attack had used the cliff to his advantage. However, Calum had anticipated this. That's why he chose Artillery Strike as Urinal's level 5 ability, an attack that ignores obstacles and strikes the target directly once its position is confirmed. Confident in her skill, Calum reassures her, which brings her to tears of relief and happiness. With 2 spots remaining at the exit gate, Calum decides to take both Back Attack and Avison with them. Late at night in the tavern, Clarence arrives to check on the resurrection scroll. Vertanen confirms that it will be ready by today, allowing them to enter the dungeon around 5 o'clock. However, Clarence knows they are running out of time. The soul preservation magic is nearing its limit. If the rescue fails, even issuing another scroll won't make resurrection possible. Determined to succeed, he resolves to eliminate every possible variable. Suddenly, Emma bursts through the door, announcing that she has brought the resurrection scroll. More urgently, she tells them to head to the dungeon office immediately. The first-floor exit gate has opened. Shocked, they rush there, hoping it could be Urinal and Calum returning alive. In the Dungeon Union's underground control room, the instructor waits near the exit gate. Despite a long delay, no one has emerged yet, and she grows increasingly tired. Moments later, Clarence, Vertanen, and their party arrive. The instructor assumes Clarence is there to see whether Avison survived, but Clarence refuses to get his hopes up. At last, something begins to emerge from the gate. The instructor watches closely, hoping for good news, but is instead shocked. Clarence immediately rushes forward to retrieve him, questioning what could have happened. She wonders aloud if a mere 2-person party could have defeated someone as powerful as Back Attack. Clarence recalls about a mysterious individual capable of high-speed, chantless casting. Just then, Urinal steps out of the gate, bringing relief to Emma and Jekyll. Vertanen expresses his confidence, saying he always believed the 2 of them would succeed. The instructor, however, is stunned to learn that the ones responsible are part of a slave team from the Magic Academy. Even for a skilled duo, defeating Back Attack would be extraordinary, but what shocks her most is that they achieved it with only 2 members, using basic equipment, and having formed their party just days ago. Finally, the gate glows red, and Calum emerges. Jekyll and Emma praise him, barely able to stand. Calum's first concern is their promised 8,000 gold. Before he can say anything more, he collapses. The scene shifts to the Temple of Nathaniel, where Calum awakens in a bed. Emma is by his side and explains that he collapsed due to an overdose from consuming too many healing potions. Despite this, Calum remains focused on the payment. Emma reassures him that the money is already on the desk. Upon checking, Calum notices it is short by 150 gold. Emma explains that the amount was deducted as a treatment fee, which frustrates Calum, as he never requested it. She clarifies that Yurnal insisted on his treatment. Emma then asks whether Calum plans to go to the Magic Academy to claim free citizen status. However, Calum is more interested in what happened to Avison and Back Attack. Emma reveals that Avison is currently in the Resurrection Chamber, and the revival process should begin soon. As for Back Attack, his body has been sent to the morgue. When Calum asks about reviving him, Emma explains that it's impossible since no soul preservation spell was cast on him. She further explains that soul preservation magic binds the soul to the body for up to 1 week, allowing revival if the body is recovered in time. However, in Back Attack's case, there is a theoretical loophole. If the dungeon master extracted his soul and stored it elsewhere, such as in a container, it might still be retrievable from the Sanctuary of Souls. Calum realizes that others assume revival is impossible simply because they are unaware of the Sanctuary's existence, a secret he only discovered on the highest difficulty level. After collecting his belongings, Calum leaves the temple and heads to the Magic Academy, where he meets Yurnal. Their goal is to use their reward money to buy their freedom from slavery, or so they believe. After calculating their shares, they discover a harsh reality. While the cost of becoming a free citizen is 3,000 gold, Yurnal's individual share amounts to only 2 gold based on contribution. Despite having enough total money, she cannot meet the requirement on her own. Faced with this outcome, Yurnal becomes overwhelmed with fear and breaks down in tears. Calum doesn't understand the outcome, so he asks the official to explain the criteria for settlement and distribution. Instead of answering verbally, the man demonstrates it using magic. With a wave of his wand, he activates a scale of fairness, a system that visually measures each participant's contribution to the adventure. According to the testimony provided by the Vertanen party, Yurnal's contribution in the exit room battle is calculated to be worth only 2 gold coins. Calum is amazed, as it is his first time witnessing such magic in action. However, he immediately objects to the result. He argues that Yurnal's contribution is being undervalued, especially since she personally crafted the weapon that ultimately defeated Back Attack. The officials dismiss this claim, stating that such factors are not relevant under the terms of the Vertanen party's contract. Refusing to back down, Calum explains that the entire plan revolved around acquiring poison arrows and clearing the exit room. Without Yurnal's skill to process the poison fangs, he would never have proposed the contract in the first place. Yurnal watches silently, feeling both grateful and emotional as Calum continues to argue on her behalf. After hearing his explanation, the official acknowledges that this information will be recorded in the scale of fairness, and they proceed to a full evaluation of the adventure. Before beginning, the official casts lie detection magic and instructs them to place their belongings on the table and truthfully recount every detail of their journey in the labyrinth. As Yurnal begins her testimony, Calum quietly urges her to do everything she can to escape slavery this time. Once the evaluation is complete, the total earnings, including magic stones and Back Attack's belongings, amount to 14,600 gold, roughly equivalent to what a typical 4-person party would earn on the first floor. However, Yurnal's share is calculated at only 20%, totaling 2,925 gold, just short of the 3,000 required to buy her freedom. Despite Calum's efforts, it is not enough. Yurnal is visibly devastated. Attempting to comfort her, the official explains that most slaves earn an average of only 200 gold, and that's with a survival rate of just 10%. Rather than reassuring her, this revelation shocks her even more. The official bluntly adds that her success and survival were largely due to following Calum's strategy. In his view, her role could be replaced by anyone capable of following instructions. Before concluding, the official gives Yurnal one final chance to protest the distribution if she is dissatisfied. With a trembling voice, she accepts the result. Calum is furious, but the official stops him, warning him against interfering out of sympathy. Realizing the situation, Calum suppresses his anger and calmly proceeds to purchase his own freedom. The required amount is deducted from his share, and the slave collar around his neck is removed. At last, Calum becomes a free citizen and the evaluation is finalized. Shortly after, mages arrive and take Yurnal away. She looks back at Calum in tears, but he remains silent, deciding instead that he will find her later at the guild. As Calum prepares to leave, the officials suggest that he enroll in the Magic Academy. Recognizing his talent, they offer full support for his growth, especially since many mages have been lost in recent labyrinth eruptions. Calum asks about the benefits, and the official begins to explain, but their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Professor Malini, who has come personally to meet the so-called genius mage. Calum greets him respectfully, but the professor shows little interest in formalities. Instead, he immediately asks Calum what he believes the true purpose of a mage is. Calum confidently answers that a mage's duty is to create new magic and suppress the monsters within the labyrinth. However, the professor rejects this answer outright. In his view, the true mission of a mage is to eliminate the otherworld entirely. He explains that repeated labyrinth eruptions have caused immense damage over time. Through extensive research on monster movements and eruption patterns, mages have concluded that these events are triggered by possessors, individuals who have crossed over from another world. If such individuals fail to enter the labyrinth for more than 2 weeks, the labyrinth erupts to eliminate them. For this reason, the professor believes that these otherworldly possessors must be identified and dealt with immediately. The professor then reveals that he has already investigated Calum's background. He claims that the crime associated with Calum was likely due to him being an otherworldly possessor. Hearing this, Calum is visibly shaken. With a faint smile, the professor invites him to join the Identification Club, a group dedicated to identifying such individuals. He then directly asks Calum whether he is a possessor. Calum remains silent. Answering carelessly would have put him in serious danger, especially since the lie detection magic is still active. Calum realizes he let his guard down the moment he left the labyrinth. Now, standing inside the Magic Academy, he understands he should have gathered more information about this world beforehand. Caught in a tense situation, he struggles to decide his next move while the professor grows increasingly suspicious of him. At that critical moment, Clarence steps in and diffuses the tension. He suggests that the professor postpone recruiting Calum, pointing out that Calum has only just returned from the labyrinth. The professor's expression shifts as he notices Clarence's presence, questioning whether Professor Isolov is also interested in Calum. Clarence confirms this calmly, stating that everyone at the academy values talent, especially rare abilities like high speed, non-incantation casting, which are far more suited for labyrinth exploration than targeting possessed individuals. His remark clearly irritates the professor, leaving him without a proper response. Taking advantage of the moment, Clarence reassures Calum that he doesn't need to make a decision immediately and encourages him to hear Professor Isolov's offer first. With that, Clarence successfully guides Calum out of danger. As they walk down the hallway, Calum reflects on how narrowly he avoided a serious situation. However, a new question arises. If magic like detection or truth verification exists, why can't the Academy easily identify otherworldly possessors? There must be limitations or restrictions on such spells. The more he thinks about it, the more frustrated he becomes, realizing how careless he had been earlier. Once the lie detection spell is lifted, Clarence formally introduces himself as a graduating mage and the older brother of Avison, the very person Calum helped save. He explains that he avoided speaking earlier out of respect, since most people consider the use of lie detection magic intrusive and offensive. In fact, its use is restricted by law and is generally permitted only during slave evaluations. This revelation frustrates Calum even more, as he realizes the professor deliberately chose that moment to question him. Clarence then explains the internal divisions within the Magic Academy. There are 3 main factions. The first is led by Professor Maldini, who believes in identifying and eliminating otherworldly possessors. The second is Professor Isolov's faction, which supports working alongside possessors to better manage labyrinth exploration. The third is Professor Dahlstream's faction, which holds a more unusual belief, that possessors should be revered. Curious, Calum asks about this final faction. Clarence explains that Professor Dahlstream studies ancient texts and magical records. According to his research, possessors may actually be engaged in a hidden conflict with the Labyrinth Master, using labyrinth entrances as a kind of battlefield. The Labyrinth Master is said to have the power to capture human souls and drive them into madness, something no ordinary person can resist. However, legends speak of a unique mage capable of resisting this influence. A turn-based mage who can halt the physical world and act purely through logic and reasoning. Clarence admits this theory sounds more like a fragmented legend than proven fact, which is why the faction has only a few members and exists mostly out of respect for its founder. Eventually, they arrive at Professor Isolov's office. Inside, the professor explains that his group focuses on researching unusual phenomena within the labyrinth, including hidden areas, ecosystems, and monster behavior. Recently, their attention has shifted toward possessed adventurers, not otherworldly possessors. According to Isolov's theory, beings like Bakatak are neither fully alive nor truly dead. Instead, their souls may have been captured and are being held somewhere within the labyrinth. Hearing this, Calum realizes that the Academy still has no knowledge of the Sanctuary of Souls. The fact that Bakatak's body was recovered presents a valuable opportunity for further investigation. Professor Isolov recognizes Calum's importance and invites him to join the group, suggesting they work together to locate Bakatak's soul. Calum smiles at the proposal. In his past experience, he has completed similar tasks, restoring the souls of possessed adventurers and even recruiting them as allies. He begins to wonder if the same might be possible here. After considering his options, Calum decides to enroll in the Magic Academy while avoiding Professor Meldini. As for Professor Dahlstream's faction, its beliefs seem too extreme. That leaves Professor Isolov's group as the most practical choice. However, Calum makes one unusual request. He wants to form his own party. This surprises Professor Isolov, as most newcomers prefer joining experienced teams due to the dangers of the labyrinth. Still, intrigued by Calum's confidence, the professor grants his request. With that, Calum officially joins Isolov's club. Later that night, an instructor escorts Calum to his assigned room and tells him to rest. When he opens the door, he is stunned by how spacious and luxurious it is, far larger than the villa he once lived in. Pleased, he asks whether future party members could stay with him, but the instructor replies that it goes against the rules. However, she casually adds that she is too busy to monitor him closely, implying he can manage things as he sees fit. After she leaves, Calum prepares to relax. The day has been overwhelming. Escaping the labyrinth, completing a major quest, regaining his freedom, and enrolling in the academy all in rapid succession. Exhausted, he plans to visit the library for more information about this world, handle admission formalities, and then go to retrieve Urinal. Calum finally allows himself a moment of rest, closing his eyes after a long and eventful day. The next day, Calum attends class, exhausted after spending the entire night researching in the library. Despite his fatigue, he knows he can't afford to be careless again, especially after what happened with the lie detection magic. As he begins to doze off, Professor Dahlstream enters the classroom, greets Calum, and introduces himself before starting the lesson. The professor explains a fundamental spell called Memorize, which allows a mage to summon a memory book. This ability is obtained through a contract with the God of Wisdom, granting access to magical storage slots. He then presents the contract required to obtain the memory book and demonstrates the spell, summoning a glowing book before the class. Afterward, he instructs the students to try it themselves and check how many slots they have. Calum follows the instructions, and his own memory book appears. The number of slots depends on the caster's level. At level 5, Calum has 3 slots. The professor explains that the number of spells a mage can learn is limited by these slots. However, by combining spells within the slots, they can create entirely new magic. He then assigns his assistant, Scarlet, to continue the lesson, claiming his back hurts. Although surprised, Scarlet takes over and leads the class to the magic practice hall. There, she explains that combining 2 first-grade spells can produce a second-grade spell, depending on the arrangement. This process is called spell bookbinding, and one of its advantages is that the resulting spell does not require additional slots. She briefly introduces the concept of triple binding, combining 3 spells, which is far more difficult and has a low success rate, but produces extremely powerful results with multiple attributes. To demonstrate, Scarlet performs a high-level spell, creating an overwhelming display of power that leaves the students stunned. Everyone except Calum, who remains unimpressed. Afterward, she presents a list of first-grade spells available for purchase at the magic bookstore and advises students to consult her if they need guidance. While reviewing Caleb's memory book, Scarlet is shocked to see that he already has all 3 slots filled, but with what she considers to be poor combinations. She can't understand his logic, especially since he chose spells that seem ineffective in combat. As the discussion draws attention, Professor Dalstream returns. After examining Caleb's setup, he surprisingly approves of it and encourages him to experiment further. Despite Scarlet's objections, the professor insists that innovation often comes from unconventional approaches. Later that night, Caleb returns to his dormitory and begins working on spellbook binding. Sitting on the sofa, he starts combining spells. First, he merges Hot Wind and Dust to create Hot Explosion, a second-grade spell. While both base spells are weak on their own, their combination produces a powerful dust explosion, stronger than a standard fireball. Next, he combines Humidify and Hot Wind to create Heat Wave, another second-grade spell. Finally, he performs a triple binding using Dust, Humidify, and Hot Wind, resulting in Cumulonimbus, a second-grade spell capable of generating storm clouds that unleash lightning. It has been a long time since Caleb last used such advanced combinations, something he previously mastered at the highest difficulty level. Excited by the result, Caleb considers testing the spell with the Hourglass of Turns. To maximize his potential, he plans to purchase a lightning wand so he can cast spells with both hands. After completing his preparations, he decides to visit the temple the next day to acquire essential items. The following morning, at the Adventurers Guild, a worker calls for Urinal. She looks dejected after learning that she is being teamed up with a group for labyrinth exploration. As she walks forward, she wonders what kind of person her next team leader will be, fearing the worst, and she doubts she will ever meet someone as kind as Caleb again. Lost in her thoughts and holding back tears, she suddenly freezes in shock. Caleb is sitting right in front of her. Startled, she asks why he's there, worried that something might have gone wrong at the academy. Caleb simply smiles and tells her that he couldn't abandon a reliable companion when she needed help. Then, raising his hand, he declares his intention to make her a free citizen. Caleb takes Urinal to the market and explains their plan. There are 2 ways for her to gain freedom. First, they will receive additional payment for recovering Avison's body. Although Urinal is unaware of the full amount, Caleb expects to receive the remaining balance from Clarence soon. With that added, her total share should exceed 1,000 gold. Until then, Caleb will keep her in his party. The second option is to continue exploring the labyrinth together. If Urinal earns enough through future expeditions, she can buy her freedom herself. Caleb then gives her a bow as a gift, knowing it suits her skills, and asks her to decide. As her hand trembles while reaching for the weapon, Caleb briefly wonders if she is still too afraid to return to the labyrinth. However, despite her fear, Urinal chooses to trust him. She takes the bow and declares that she will become his companion. Relieved, Caleb smiles. He had been worried she might refuse. He then reveals that he has already found another party member. Hearing this, Urinal's mood brightens instantly, and she eagerly asks him to introduce them.